The trouble with Kristen Stewart um, is that, well, she's the Shuna Zila, so the beautiful soul. But this is a very troubled figure for Western philosophy, whether or not it brings our Dharma into equilibrium is at stake. There could be a moment like where the Ancien regime or the old regency is a perfect kingdom, where the equilibrium of the Dharma is settled. But it could be that that's just a legend, like the Constas Solon. So the point so there's some chapters in Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit somewhere in like 660 something section, but if you would ask Grok where does Hegel talk about the beautiful soul, then you'll find the exact passages. And in addition, I think the guy, I don't really otherwise I don't recommend him, but because he makes a lot of petty mistakes, and also he's not very good. I think his name is Sadler, has gone through the whole of the Phenomenology of Spirit and done a commentary on every single section. So that's something worth of value in itself. But primarily, I want to talk about the conception from a different avenue than from Hegel's technical view, where he's basically trying to... what Hegel's basically saying is, you have the problem that the Shuna Zila, or beautiful soul, is relative to the time. And to kind of flesh that out, let's say it this way: if anyone today were, no matter how expert they were on the England of Chaucer, let's say, if they were to go there, even if they would know that language, because English was a little bit different language at that time, perfectly, the claim Hegel is making is nobody would recognize them as Englishmen. Nobody would think they were a contemporary of them. They would all think they're sort of alien. And this sort of links up to what we were doing in the last one, where I was trying to thematize this question of not a matter of nature and nurture, not a matter of DNA versus upbringing or something, not a Steven Pinker type of question, not a Steven Pinker on the left, progressive left, or super progressive left, but just as little a question of the guy that wrote the Charles Murray, or who has an ActiveX account, I think, and writes some posts that are worth looking at in some respects, but not a matter of this kind of question of evolution and selective breeding by the 19th century English, Galston, and the Binet style of Stanford Binet test style of gauging intelligence and various variations on that. Not a matter of selective breeding at all, but a matter of rather more similar to the idea that the ancients had of the sacred fire and of the hearth fire and of pronouncing the prayers of the family, and that Anwesen property or being. It's strange that word Anwesen, real estate in German, is also used to translate the Greek, early Greek term ousia, or being. The Anwesen, or the real estate or the property, however, didn't originate in a capitalist system of trying to make money through buying and selling. This is always, like, I started this with the notion of the trouble with Kristen Stewart, but there's a Hitchcock in 1955, The Trouble with Harry. And Hitchcock is always posing his villains as basically, the villain is the person when you ask him what he does for a living and he says, I buy and sell things, as in The Man Who Knew Too Much with Jimmy Stewart. This is this class of financiers. But in any case, the point here is that we have a figure that's linked to the time specifically, and then linked to something that develops not in the sense of the nature-nurture type questions, but in the sense of the passing on of the sacred fire from the hearth fire of the family, which is what one learns prior to any schoolroom or prior to any collective education, but the passing on of the thing that's in the early upbringing, in the earliest upbringing. There's a discussion sort of on that touches on that in the Nomoi, or the laws of Plato, about I think that's in the laws, or is that actually in the, I think it's in the laws, about the early education by music and this kind of thing, harmonizing. But so the point is, Hegel tries to give a scientific account of how this type of thing changes and alters, and then comes to the what superimposing sort of the thought of a dhyana or a Hindu thinking would be a kind of dharmic equilibrium moment. And that would be the moment when Hegel speaks of the absolute, and of which, in a way, I don't see, which in a crude way we could overlay with, I mean, I think Hegel thinks of this, but then the problem is exactly how does he think of it, and then how can we work with that exactly, rather than just as a transfer of meaning through a analogy or metaphor or something, or simile or something. But Hegel does think again of the John 5:16 and this kind of thing of the no longer having outward proofs because you're at the absolute moment, but you just have that you're lit from within totally. Your essence, your Dasein is lit from within, and everything is intelligible under that dispensation, or under that under the happy equilibrium, whereby knowledge and truth and the good are all come to be the same. So, but then that's the problem with the beautiful soul. The beautiful soul is the problem that this is a perfect human being from this perspective of, I went into this in one earlier video, but from the perspective of, let's say, both introverted and extroverted, both quick in the moment, extroverted, and both able to reflect totally, or stand back in cool reflection, scientific reflection. Yeah, both feminine and masculine in that sense, both feminine and male in that sense. And also just generally not having any obvious petty defects of character, of the intellect, of courage, of other things. So that's obviously, I would say, one could say of Kristen Stewart, we can't say, oh, she's not courageous or something, or she's lacks intellect, because you listen to her analyze things about film and so on. And so this is often referred to in Homeric thinking as a man without a flaw, which doesn't mean anything really exalted, but it just means from the ordinary hoi polloi direct way, it's hard to find a simple character flaw in some people. Usually most people maybe they're kind of too perfect in some way that you think they're maybe vain, or they have some kind of ego problem. There's a lack of equilibrium. There's usually inferiority complex, or the reverse, which amounts to the same thing, or there's something else obviously wrong with most people. But the beautiful soul is more. The problem with the beautiful soul is more tragic in that it's more like with Socrates, where the problem is the moment in history. So Nietzsche accuses Socrates of being the first theoretical man and bringing in this dangerous power of making theory as powerful as the actual way human beings are currently living, so that there's a rivalry between the current order and the agenda for making it better. So, yeah, look at that more. But my whole point is sort of just to bring this into contemporary immediacy is that so. I think Dugan has said that Kristen Stewart is their leader. She's their leader. So it's sort of like with the people that Charlie Kirk referred to as the Alphabet Mafia. It's kind of interesting because Alphabet is also a name for, I think, the parent company of Google, which is, some people say, is totally contaminated by the Mossad and by other agencies. But I mean, I think he uses that phrase just because of the LGBTQ plus and etc. So Alphabet Mafia. But this is sort of also connected to the rise in tattoos and things like that. I think tattoos actually, despite what people might think, were not always popular, say, among movie stars, for instance. You could see that very clearly, like, and among people born to old money or whatever. But it became popular at some point, and maybe it's interesting, somebody was saying that movie with Guy Pearce about him having a memory disorder of the memory or whatever, was one of the moments when people started to realize the popularity of tattoos in general was exploding, and hasn't debated since then. Has become more generally accepted. Now that's actually I mean, there's a straightforward question. I just don't know the answers. Like, are Russian Orthodox women often getting tattoos? So that, I mean, that's something like that could overlap without maybe even the Orthodox Church really noticing. I don't know. But in any case, the point is, you can have the beautiful soul, but it would be within a specific culture. And then, well, let me just do a sort of like, try to suggest a deep problem, which maybe I'm not really the proponent of, but it's interesting just because a reader of Leo Strauss, Shadia Druria, has proposed it, and she says, when we have the Socratic moment, where, so for instance, especially in the Euthyphro, where Socrates says, okay, that the gods, can it be that the gods are the theoi, or the gods are in disagreement, and each having different agendas, or must it be that they all fall under this thing that became the summum bonum in Thomas? But this is already theorized in the Euthyphro, and then more thoroughly in Aristotle. That all the theoi, or gods, ultimately fall under this idea of the agathon, or the good, and that they're all one. And then one can come to this doctrine, Aristotelian doctrine of evil doesn't really exist. It's just a deprivation of good. And then the heresy against that with the Manichaeans and so on. But this whole teaching, so then what Shadia Druria is saying, this whole Socratic teaching in Socrates was somehow part of some cults and stuff like that, according to many of the standard teachings, although nothing of it appears directly in Plato or in the text directly talking about him. But the idea is this was a beautiful soul from within a specific culture. So the homology is, you'd say, here we have an exceptional person who's not merely themselves or their egotistical substance. They're, at the same time, they go beyond their individual self and they're have a collective meaning. And this is obviously true of Socrates, and I'd say this is obviously true. Maybe it's a lesser, but maybe it just hasn't been fully expressed yet. I think it hasn't been fully expressed yet. In Kristen Stewart, this is also true. This is not just an egotistical individual being, but it's also, there's something super individual in it, which then puts the lie to any system such as classical liberalism, which pretends atomized individuals can be the basis for human existence. But then you see the problem's obvious. So we have both this whole analysis that gives us the notion of the beautiful soul, and then in Hegel, which has been following through the whole analysis, which goes all the way back to Aristotle and back to Socrates. Once we see clearly that this could be understood in this Reinhold Niebuhr sense that Nietzsche is bringing out in the how does that go? The Nutzen und Nachteil der Historia für das Leben. In the beneficial and the harmful gathered out of history for the service, to give themselves over to the service of life, according to Nietzsche. So then there becomes this problem of we have to actively select which forces should be given over to the service of life, rather than allowing them to compound into an endless scientific cache of knowledge, which becomes a sort of brittle museum in itself. There must be a constant choice about this selection. But this choice, so then all I'm saying is this choice extends also to noticing that the most basic features of this Western way of thinking are no more or less sort of randomly given than are the latest Ursprungs or origins of current political Dasein movements. I mean, the current movements that somebody has grown into their whole life, and even though they're there's an unfolding of it at a certain moment. I mean, it's the same with Socrates, okay? That's like, there's a moment when there's people going around from city to city with different ideas, and some of them are very profound ideas, like Heraclitus and the one and the many, and Parmenides, one taking the side of the one, the other taking the side of the many, in this sense that they ask very simple questions, like, here's this tree here, but how is it that when all the leaves fall off, it's still a tree, and when various things change about it, it's still a tree? When does it cease to become a tree? The one is the treeness, and the tree, the thing that's still the same for a while, But then once you hack it up into firewood, is it still a tree or is it something else? It seems like, and then different answers can come from that, because you could say things like, when you've hacked it up into firewood, it doesn't seem like it's developing itself as a tree anymore. It's just being used by somebody externally, whereas if you would move it and put it in better soil so it would be more beautiful in a garden, maybe that also furthers the nature of the tree and not just external use of the person that's getting something in their interest out of it. And then all kinds of different questions arise. But why are we only in this way of thinking that stems from those? Are they genuinely elemental and necessary features of our thought?